The Awakening of Monsters. The first rays of Proxima Centauri painted New Eden's sky with ribbons of crimson and gold as dawn broke over humanity's most successful colony. 10 years of terraforming had transformed the once barren planet into a thriving outpost, home to nearly 30,000 souls who had journeyed from Earth seeking a fresh start. Dr. Mira Santos stood on her balcony overlooking the central plaza, savoring the rare moment of peace before beginning her day at the medical center. Her comlink chirped softly, but before she could answer, the sky exploded. They came without warning. Massive obsidian ships, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal, tore through the atmosphere with a sound like the planet itself screaming. The attack began with precision strikes, communication centers, defense platforms, power grids, all obliterated within moments. Then came the landing craft, disgorging creatures that moved like liquid shadow, their translucent exoskeletons shimmering with bioluminescent patterns as they slaughtered everyone in their path. The Krell, as humanity would later learn to call them, didn't negotiate. They didn't make demands. They simply began the systematic extermination of every human on New Eden. Mira survived by luck and instinct, diving into a maintenance tunnel seconds before her apartment complex was vaporized. For 3 days, she navigated the colony's underbelly, witnessing horrors that would haunt her for the rest of her life. On the 4th day, she stumbled into the arms of Commander Elena Reyes. "Got another one," Elena called over her shoulder as she steadied the shell-shocked doctor. Her face was streaked with blood and soot, her standard-issue colonial defense uniform, torn and singed. But her eyes, those eyes held something the Krell couldn't touch. Pure, undiluted fury. Elena led what remained of New Eden's defense force, now a patchwork resistance of military personnel, civilians, and whoever else could hold a weapon or provide support. They had established a hidden base in the abandoned mineshafts beneath the Hansen Mountains, using the planet's natural magnetic anomalies to shield them from Krell scanners. "They're not just killing us," Elena explained during the Resistance's nightly briefing, standing before a makeshift holographic display showing the colony's remains. "They're harvesting, taking our technology, our resources, even biological samples from our dead." Her voice didn't waver as she continued. "Initial reports from other colonies suggest this is happening across all human settlements in the Proxima Centauri system." Dr. Prisha Sharma, once the colony's leading xenobiologist, now their best hope for understanding their enemy, stepped forward. "I've been analyzing the data we've gathered on the Krell," she said, her fingers dancing across a tablet. "Their technology is centuries beyond ours, but they have a significant weakness." The room fell silent as she projected her findings. "Their neural network operates on a telepathic frequency. It makes them devastatingly efficient in combat. But," she paused, allowing herself a small, grim smile, "it also makes them vulnerable to disruption. Their communications, their coordination, even their weapons systems are all connected through this network." "So we scramble the signal," said Reyes, immediately grasping the implications. "Exactly," Prisha nodded. "I've modified some of our seismic mapping equipment. With the right adjustments, we can create a localized disruption field." That night, Elena led a small team into what remained of the colony center. They moved like ghosts through the ruins of what had once been home, carrying components salvaged from mining equipment, medical scanners, and communication arrays, seemingly random pieces cobbled together by Dr. Sharma's desperate genius. They encountered a Krell patrol near the power distribution hub. The aliens moved with unnatural grace, their mandibles clicking in rhythmic patterns that served as their language. One of Elena's team, a young engineer named Malik, accidentally dislodged a piece of debris. The sound, barely audible to human ears, brought the Krell spinning toward them, weapons raised. Elena nodded to Prisha, who activated the device. Nothing happened for the first 3 seconds. Then the Krell began to screech, a high-pitched sound that cut through the night like shattered glass. They stumbled, their coordinated movements dissolving into chaotic, jerking motions. Their weapons, biological extensions of their own bodies, pulsed erratically. "Now!" Elena shouted, and the resistance opened fire. The skirmish lasted less than a minute. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had won a fight against the Krell. The team returned to base with captured Krell weapons and technology, and something even more valuable: hope. Word spread through the hidden pockets of survivors. Small victories began to accumulate. Humans, adaptable by nature, and now driven by a desperate will to survive, began to turn the Krell's tactics against them. Mining explosives became traps. Medical equipment was repurposed into weapons that targeted the Krell's unique biology. Communication systems were hacked to broadcast disruptive signals across Krell frequencies. The Krell, initially dismissive of human resistance, began to take notice. Their tactics shifted from simple extermination to actively hunting resistance cells, but they had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had classified humans as prey. 3 weeks after the initial invasion, Elena stood before an expanded resistance force. What had begun as a handful of survivors had grown to over 500 fighters spread across multiple cells. Their faces were gaunt, their bodies bearing the scars of battle and privation, but their eyes burned with the same fury as hers. "They came here thinking we were sheep for the slaughter," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the cavern. "They thought we'd lie down and die." She activated a holographic map showing Krell positions and the growing number of resistance-controlled zones. They were wrong. A former colony administrator named Harrison, who had lost his entire family in the initial attack, stepped forward. "We've decoded some of their communications," he said. "They're calling us the vermin that won't die." A ripple of dark laughter spread through the crowd. "Good," Elena nodded. "Let's show them what happens when you corner rats." The Resistance launched their first major offensive the next day. Using Dr. Sharma's disruption technology, now miniaturized and mass-produced using salvaged components, they targeted the Krell's main landing zone. The attack was not designed to destroy the Krell force. They didn't have that capability yet, but to send a message. Elena led the strike team herself, moving through the pre-dawn darkness with practiced silence. The Krell had established a forward operating base in what had once been the colony spaceport, their biomechanical structures pulsing with an eerie blue-green light. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and coordinated, until Prisha activated the disruptors. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Krell. Their neural network collapsed, leaving individual soldiers isolated and confused. The Resistance struck from multiple angles, using captured Krell weapons alongside improvised human armaments. They didn't just kill. They left messages scrawled in Krell biochemical markings. "We are not prey. We are predators." As Elena's team extracted, a Krell commander emerged from the central structure. Unlike the soldiers, this one stood nearly 10 feet tall, its exoskeleton adorned with complex patterns that seemed to shift and change as it moved. It fixed its compound eyes on Elena and did something unexpected. It spoke, its voice a modulated series of clicks and whistles translated through some unknown technology. "You fight well, human," it said, the words strangely flat and emotionless. "But you cannot win. We are legion, and you are few." Elena paused, turning to face the creature. "You know what your mistake was?" she asked, her voice steady. "You pushed too far. You didn't just attack us. You showed us exactly what we're fighting for." She gestured to the burning structures around them. "And you know what humans do when we have nothing left to lose. We get really, really nasty." She activated the final set of charges as her team retreated. The explosion illuminated the night sky, visible for miles, a beacon to every survivor on New Eden, a declaration that humanity was fighting back. In their hidden base, monitoring Krell communications, Dr. Sharma made a discovery that changed everything. "They're scared," she said, looking up from her equipment with wonder in her eyes. "These beings, with all their technology and power, They're actually afraid of us now. Elena studied the data, a grim satisfaction settling over her. Good, she said. That's exactly what we want. She turned to address the gathered resistance leaders. From this moment, we don't just fight to survive. We fight to terrify. Let's show these bastards what real monsters look like. As if in response to her words, reports began coming in from across the colony. More survivors emerging from hiding, more resistance cells forming, more Krell patrols ambushed and destroyed. What had begun as desperate survival was evolving into something else entirely. A human counteroffensive that would soon spread beyond New Eden to every colony in the system. The Krell had come expecting easy victory. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and terrible in their human prey. The primal will to survive at any cost. The capacity for violence that had allowed a species of clever apes to dominate an entire planet, and the adaptability that had carried humanity to the stars. They had unleashed hell, and humanity was just getting started. The hunters become the hunted. 6 months after the invasion of New Eden, the Krell High Command convened an emergency council aboard their flagship in orbit. The massive chamber, lined with the biological-mechanical hybrid technology that characterized Krell engineering, pulsed with agitated energy as clan leaders and military commanders gathered to address what had become an increasingly urgent problem. Humans. Incomprehensible, hissed Supreme Commander Vexnar, its exoskeleton flashing patterns of distress as it reviewed the latest casualty reports. These creatures, these mammals with their primitive technology and fragile bodies, how are they inflicting such losses? The Krell had conquered 27 species across 12 star systems. None had offered significant resistance beyond their initial defensive actions. Humans were different. Not only had they survived the methodical extermination protocols, but they were now actively hunting Krell forces. They adapt, replied Science Director Tasleen, its voice modulated to convey data rather than emotion. They salvage our technology, reverse engineer it, modify it to suit their particular biology and tactics. Each defeat teaches them. Each victory emboldens them. Worse, they communicate these learnings across vast distances with remarkable speed. They should have broken, Vexnar insisted. No species continues fighting when victory is mathematically impossible. Humans do not operate according to mathematical probability, Tasleen responded. They operate on something they call hope, a concept our translators struggle to properly contextualize. It appears to be a form of collective delusion that favorable outcomes are possible despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. On the holographic display dominating the center of the chamber, red indicators showed Krell losses across the Proxima Centauri system. New Eden had been merely the beginning. As news of the resistance spread, human colonies on other planets and moons had risen up, employing similar tactics with increasing sophistication. Most disturbing were reports of a new human combat unit that colonial communications referred to as nightmares. These were not conventional military forces. They were small, elite teams of survivors who had lost everything, who had witnessed the worst of the Krell atrocities, and who now devoted themselves entirely to making the Krell experience fear. On Proxima B3, a mining colony with less than 2,000 inhabitants had destroyed an entire Krell battle cruiser. On the ice moon of Proxima, human resistance fighters had captured a Krell research facility, turned its biological experiments against their creators, and broadcast the results across all Krell communication channels. They do not just kill, Vexnar observed, a flicker of something approaching respect in its tone. They send messages. Back on New Eden, Commander Elena Reyes had transformed from leader of a desperate resistance cell into the general of a formidable fighting force. The hidden base beneath the Hansen Mountains had expanded into a sprawling underground city, home to thousands of survivors and the headquarters of humanity's counteroffensive. The Krell are pulling back, Elena announced to her war council, now comprised of military leaders from across the Proxima Centauri system, connected via secure quantum channels. They're consolidating their forces around their primary installations and evacuation points. Harrison, now her chief of intelligence, nodded in agreement. Our latest intercepted communications suggest their high command is considering a strategic withdrawal from the system. They're not withdrawing, Dr. Sharma interjected, her face grim. The past months had transformed the once academic xenobiologist into a hardened warrior scientist, her expertise on Krell biology, making her one of humanity's most effective weapons developers. They're preparing for a final solution. She projected the data her team had decoded. These energy signatures, these deployment patterns, they're positioning for a system-wide purge. If they can't have our colonies, they'll make sure we can't have them either. The council fell silent, processing the implications. The Krell were preparing to scorch every habitable world in the system rather than accept defeat. How long do we have? Elena asked. 3 days, maybe 4, Prisha replied. Elena stood, her decision already made. Then we strike first, not just to defend, but to end this, permanently. The plan that emerged was audacious to the point of insanity. While scattered resistance forces throughout the system would launch coordinated attacks on Krell ground installations, Elena would leave a select team of nightmares in a direct assault on the Krell flagship. Their objective: capture or kill the Krell High Command and force an unconditional surrender. This is suicide, Harrison stated flatly during the final briefing. Probably, Elena agreed with a shrug. But it's better than watching them burn our worlds. And besides, she added with a grim smile, we've gotten pretty good at surviving impossible situations. The assault began at dawn, human time. Across 7 worlds and 16 moons, resistance forces struck Krell positions simultaneously. They no longer fought like guerrillas but like predators, confident, coordinated, and utterly merciless. They had studied their enemy for months, learning the Krell's weaknesses, their tendencies, their fears. And the Krell had learned to fear much about humans, their unpredictability, their willingness to sacrifice themselves for strategic advantage, their capacity for harboring grudges across generations, but most of all, their adaptability. Elena's strike team infiltrated the flagship using a captured Krell shuttle, their life signs masked by technology reverse-engineered from Krell stealth systems. They moved through the massive vessel like ghosts, placing Prisha's latest creation, singularity charges capable of tearing holes in the fabric of space-time. At critical junctures, they encountered resistance, of course. Krell elite guards fought with the desperation of a species unaccustomed to being hunted. The fighting was brutal, close quarters, and personal. Elena lost half her team before they reached the central command chamber. Supreme Commander Vexnar awaited them, surrounded by its personal guard and the remnants of the High Command. The massive Krell leader's exoskeleton pulsed with patterns of rage and determination. "You fight well, for prey," it said as Elena and her surviving team entered, weapons raised. "We're not prey," Elena replied, blood streaming from a wound on her forehead, her voice steady. "We never were. You just didn't recognize predators different from yourselves. And now you would destroy us all," Vexnar observed, gesturing toward the singularity charges Elena's team had planted throughout the ship. "Mutual annihilation. Is this your species' concept of victory?" "No," Elena said. "This is insurance. What I want is your surrender, unconditional, immediate, and broadcast to every Krell in this system." Vexinar's compound eyes studied her, its exoskeleton shifting patterns rapidly as it communicated with the remnants of its command staff. After what seemed an eternity, it responded, "Impossible. The Krell do not surrender." "Then the Krell will learn something new today," Elena said, and nodded to Prisha, who activated a device they had brought specifically for this confrontation. The effect was instantaneous. Every Krell in the chamber collapsed, their neural network not merely disrupted but painfully overloaded. Vexnar alone remained standing, though clearly in agony. "This is not a negotiation," Elena continued, approaching the Krell leader until they stood face to face. "Your forces withdraw from human space, all human space, not just this system. You will release any human captives. You will provide reparations for the colonies you've destroyed. And you will never, ever return. And if I refuse? Vexnar managed to ask through its pain. Elena smiled, and there was nothing human in that expression. Then I demonstrate why pushing humans too far was the worst mistake your species ever made. We won't just defeat you here. We'll follow you home. We'll study how you live, how you think, what you fear. And then we'll break you, world by world, clan by clan, until the only Krell left are those we choose to preserve in zoos as a reminder of what happens when you mistake humans for easy prey. She activated her comm unit, broadcasting to all resistance forces throughout the system. This is Commander Reyes. Stand ready to deploy the Lazarus Protocol on my mark. The Lazarus Protocol didn't exist, not in the way Elena implied. But the Krell didn't know that. All they knew was that humans, these terrifyingly adaptable, irrationally persistent creatures, had consistently done the impossible since the invasion began. Vexinar's exoskeleton flashed a pattern that Elena had never seen before. It took her a moment to recognize it as pure, undiluted fear. "Stop," it said finally. "We will comply." The surrender was broadcast across all Krell channels. Within hours, Krell forces throughout the system began withdrawing. The war that had begun with a surprise attack aimed at human extermination ended not with humanity's extinction, but with the Krell's retreat. In the months that followed, humanity rebuilt. New Eden and the other colonies rose from their ashes, stronger and more unified than before. The technology salvaged and reverse-engineered from the Krell accelerated human development by centuries. Defense systems were established throughout human space, ready for any future threats. But the greatest change was psychological. Humanity had faced extinction, and not merely survived but triumphed. They had looked into the abyss of their own potential for violence, and found it equal to any challenge the universe might present. 1 year after the invasion, Elena stood on the same balcony where Dr. Mira Santos had watched the first Krell ships descend. The city below was a blend of human and adapted Krell architecture, its streets busy with the activity of rebuilding and expansion. Was it worth it? Mira asked, joining her at the railing. The doctor had returned to her medical practice, though now she specialized in treating the physical and psychological scars of the war. Elena considered the question, watching as the sun set over the New Eden. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "We lost so many, but we learned something important about ourselves. That we can be monsters when we need to be." Mira asked quietly. "No," Elena replied. "That we won't be exterminated. That we belong among the stars. And that anyone who thinks we're easy prey is making a very, very big mistake." As darkness fell, the first ships of the new human defense fleet rose into the night sky, their engines painting streaks of light across the heavens. They carried with them not just the legacy of those who had fallen, but a message to any who might threaten humanity in the future. We are not prey. We are not livestock. We are human. And if pushed too far, we will show you exactly what real monsters look like.